A gift of 2 pieces of gum shared by 30 starving children is all it took to start Operation Little Vittles. With one small act of kindness, Gail S. Halvorsen had a profound impact on the Berlin airlift and became the face of American freedom. Gail S. Halvorsen was born in Utah, 1920. At 18 years old, he found his calling to fly while thinning sugar beet fields when a friend buzzed him during a flyby. Through a competition in early 1941, he was able to obtain his private pilot license. By June 1944, he earned his wings in the Army Air Corps. Halvorsen flew airlift missions in the C-47 Skytrain and C-54 Skymaster in Brazil before his assignment to Mobile, Alabama, where he flew the C-74 Globemaster. On 24 June 1948, in an effort to drive French, British, and American presence out of Berlin, the Soviet Union cut off all water and land access to West Berlin. The Western powers, determined not to abandon the people of West Berlin, audaciously resolved to deliver the beleaguered population the supplies they needed by way of the uncontested air corridors. Thus, on 28 June 1948, Operation Vittles, or the Berlin Airlift, began. On 10 July 1948, Lieutenant Halvorsen's squadron was called to deploy its C-54s to Germany in support of the Berlin Airlift. Halvorsen was quick to volunteer, and just 36 hours after leaving Alabama, he flew his first mission into Tempelhof Airfield in Berlin. During the operation, aircrews typically flew 2 to 3 missions daily carrying food, coal, and medicine into West Berlin. During one of Halvorsen's crew rest periods, he hitched a flight to Berlin to see more of the city. While on his ground tour, he met a crowd of 30 children at the end of the Tempelhof runway. Halvorsen was touched by their politeness and wisdom. One child pleaded with Halvorsen to keep flying missions through winter, saying, "We don't have enough to eat. Just don't leave us. Someday we will have enough to eat, but if we lose our freedom, we will never get it back." Inspired, Halvorsen offered the children the only gift he had, 2 sticks of gum. Wanting to do more, he promised to drop more candy from his airplane the next day. Halvorsen told the children they could identify his aircraft because he would rock his wings. Thus, he became known as Uncle Wiggly Wings, or more commonly, the Berlin Candy Bomber. Halvorsen's secret candy drops became public knowledge when his humanitarian initiative was reported on the front page of European newspapers. After that, candy drops were officially sanctioned under the name Operation Little Vittles. The American military in Berlin and subsequently the American public rallied behind the idea. Before the airlift ended in September 1949, they supplied over 22 tons of goodies, which Halvorsen and crews dropped by small parachutes to German children. Following his return to the United States, Halvorsen earned a master's degree in aeronautical engineering from the University of Florida. Subsequently, he worked on the Dinosaur, Titan III, and reusable manned spacecraft programs. His final assignment was as the Tempelhof Air Base commander. Colonel Halvorsen retired from service in 1974, but his legacy is enduring as the ultimate servant leader. Through his continued work with the Berlin Airlift Historical Foundation, Halvorsen still participates in candy drops to commemorate the Berlin Airlift and honor the 71 British and American servicemen that made the ultimate sacrifice in order to keep West Berlin free. During the fragile peace that followed World War II, Halvorsen's actions mended relations between bitter wartime enemies. He fueled the hope of all Berliners, created a positive American image in post-war Germany, and inspired American support in the cause of keeping Berlin free.
Help me welcome Colonel Gail Halvorsen to the stage.
All right, go.
Go down this way, guys. Hey, guys, this way. You can go down the stairs. Third row. Sit in the third row. All right, sir. Go ahead.
Can you sit and sit over here? All right. I thought it was a good idea. Who knew? Colonel Halvorsen, it's a pleasure to have you here. We're so grateful to have you on this stage today.
Well, I'm especially glad to be here. If it wasn't for kids just like that, catching them instead of throwing it, I wouldn't be here. But I'm grateful. At 95 years old, I'm grateful to be anywhere, as a matter of fact. But I'm especially grateful to be here. You know, I got great memories of this place. In 1957, I was a student, and I got more than an education. Something happened to the hospital. I got a future C-130 pilot, Air Force guy, and so I was happy to pick that. Now, not all of you can claim that. I tell you, get a young son born here the same time you're here. But I'm really pleased to be back in the epitome of the Air Force spirit and the futures of leaders of the Air Force, men and women. Man, we're going to be in good shape.
Well, we're grateful to have you. I noticed you're wearing two different sets of wings. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was invited. The British invited a few Americans to train with the RAF during the war. A couple of reasons. One of them, get them out of traffic pattern, train them in the States, and to teach them how to speak English. So we had a great time. I got a chance to train with them and had a wonderful experience. Trouble was, when I put their names back in personnel, they signed me as a cargo pilot, for peace sake. And again, I wouldn't be here if they hadn't done that, I guess.
That's wonderful. So let's go all the way back to the beginning, though. As you saw in the video, you come from very humble beginnings. What in the world made you want to leave those sugar beet fields of Utah?
Well, I was raised on a small farm in northern Utah. We couldn't afford a tractor, so I was the only tractor my dad had. And the sugar beet was a motivator. That was a beast of a crop to grow. You had to thin them out 12 inches apart in the spring and on your hands and knees, and it was a mess. In the dust, I'd look up in the sky, and there goes an airplane from Utah to Idaho, and boy, just having a blast. Wow, and I'd go back to the work. Well, there was a competition at that time. They weren't getting enough pilots in the Air Force, just before the war at Pearl Harbor. And they had put out a program for a non-college pilot training program. I didn't have much money to go to school. I could get a little correspondence. And there was all the towns in northern Utah run a ground school for a couple of months for the pilot training, for the pilot exam program written. And there was 140 of us. And then they gave 10 scholarships. I memorized everything. I got one. So I started flying. I had 10 of us that got the scholarships out of Brigham City. Our instructor was the first time he had any students too, so we all learned together. But the one thing that was interesting about that, when we got through that training, we put in $50 each and bought an airplane. Try that. Well, it was a Piper Cub, but it had a 55 horsepower Franklin engine, single ignition. So every time you took off, you looked for a landing place. That one mag quit, boy, you're a glider. So that's a good way to learn. The instructor says, all of a sudden, in different maneuvers, you say, the engine just quit. And boy, you better have a place to land. You didn't pass.
So you have your wings, you train with the RAF, and let's fast forward now to your experience in Mobile, Alabama. What made you want to join the Berlin Airlift?
Well, the thing that wanted me go into Berlin Airlift, during the war I was a transport guy, and went to Mobile, Alabama, the transition point, and I wanted to be the guy when they cut off Stalin cut off the food to millions of people, and mostly women and children. And I was in one squadron, and the squadron was tasked to go was a different squadron. But my buddy, married buddy, he just had a 6-month-old baby, and I was single, and Sundays they'd have me over for dinner. And Pete Soa was on the list to go on the Berlin airlift. And I'd seen how they loved that baby. And I wanted to go. My girlfriend wasn't writing too good letters right then. I said, boy, Pete, if I can work it, you stay here and I'll go in your place. He said, boy, I hope you can do that. But Colonel Hahn, the commander of both squadrons, says, sure, we'll just switch them. So it's kind of a fluke that I got to go.
Tell me about how you and your friends felt about going to deliver food and supplies to the same people who just a few years earlier were dedicated to changing the world forever.
Boy, that's a key area in how we respond to different stimuli. It's been said by somebody that we can control 95% of how we respond to our environment without getting ulcers, if we take that initiative initially. And the other 5%, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change and the courage to change the things I can't. So I was bitter about the Germans. When I got that pilot license and got that airplane, my best buddy that I went to high school with says, Hal, I want to try that. Things don't look good in the world. I'd like to try flying. I always wanted to. So I was an expert. I had 35 hours. I said, I'll show you how to do it. So I took him on a flight. I had to take up in the high mountains on a hot day. It was hard to get any altitude, a 55 horsepower engine. So right next to the mountain, we'd have updrafts. And we, like a glider, we'd ride the updrafts up the ridge, 10,000 feet. Mountains were 9 or more. And go to the valley and do a turn spin and come back and do it again. So he could do 2 turn spins pretty quick. He was coordinated. Well, as soon as Pearl Harbor came, Conrad went down and enlisted in the Army Air Corps. Trained as a fighter pilot, sent to England. The Germans shot down my buddy and killed him. That was a pretty hard load to bear. I felt like I'd really put him into that position. So I didn't feel very good about the Germans. I had a cross to bear. And then when the blockade came, I knew then when Pete had a decision to make, when I volunteered to take Pete's place. But then I knew that most all the people in Berlin were women and children, 2.5 million people. Most of the guys were gone, or dead, or still prisoners of war in Russia. So it didn't take long for me to say, between Pete and the women and kids were taking the brutal bunt of taking away the milk for the babies. That changed me.
It's amazing that you would have that experience and then still have the desire to go and be a part of taking care of people who were your bitter enemy just a few years earlier. So what was it when you were there that made you want to take the ground tour of Berlin? And if you could, walk us through what went through your mind that led you to giving 2 sticks of gum to those kids.
Well, furthest I got away from home most of the time. I was on a farm. We had lots of love and plenty of food, and that was all we knew we needed. And I had a good horse all the time. I was raised on a horse, chasing cows. And when I was a little guy, the furthest I got away from home was when my brother went to town with the parents, and he had a horse, but he had a fancy horse. I had an old plug, and he wouldn't let me ride his horse. But when he went to town, I got on that horse, and he went through a barbed wire fence with me and cut my leg, and well, I got in all kind of trouble. But that's the kind of thing that hitchhiked me. The other question.
No, it was about what made you want to take that ground tour in Berlin.
Yeah. Okay. I just getting ready to tell you how far I'd been before I got to Berlin. So I was a farm kid going to Berlin, and we right there, and the first flight in, all the buildings looked like they were just stark to the sky, no roofs on. It was rough. And we'd get there, land, do 3 round trips a day, go to bed and do it all again right quick. And I wanted to get pictures in the streets of Berlin, the devastation. I always carried a movie camera with me. And so I did 3 round trips just before noon, came back to West Germany, and I had my camera, an airplane. My buddy had a load of flour going to Berlin, next Hardstand. And I said, boy, instead of going to bed, I'm going to go to Berlin. Told my co-pilot, go to bed, I'll be here tonight, evening, but time to fly back to Berlin. And I jumped on his airplane, went to Berlin, had a buddy with a Jeep waiting for me, took me around, shot movies all over, ended up at the barbed wire fence around the field to keep people from getting run over with airplanes. Shoot movies, airplanes coming over my head. And barbed wire, and right up against it with this uniform, and all of a sudden about 30 kids, boys and girls, mixed, came right up the barbed wire, right against the uniform. Just a few years before it was killing their brothers and sisters, and aunts and uncles and their parents. And they were friendly. Why were they friendly? They knew their aunts and uncles and cousins were on their side of the red line in East Berlin. And they came over to West Berlin. You don't want anything to do with those guys. They tell you what you're going to be, what you're going to do, what you're going to eat. Anything you can do to make this succeed. I don't think they can feed you all. But for Pete's sake, stick with them. The kids were the bottom line. Spread out that information. Stick with it. You can't imagine the difference in how you live in West Berlin and how we live with the Soviets. The kids, again, on that end, did it. That's where it came from.
One of the stories you told me when I was sitting on your couch in your home was how the children reacted when you handed them that stick of gum.
Oh, yeah. Well, anyway, I was there for an hour talking to them. And they were cheering me up. Said, look, it's just the beginning. It's beautiful weather. It's sun shining. You don't have any trouble. But when the winter comes, you guys are flying between the buildings in order to get down. The runway's too short. And we have trouble getting stopped with a 20,000-pound load in the back end. So the radar was set right between the buildings. We come right below the buildings on the final approach to get in there. And I wanted to shoot that movie of that approach. And those kids were right there for an hour. They were just cheering me up, says, hey, look, don't worry. When that fog comes in, don't worry about us. We don't have to have enough to eat. Just don't give up on us. Someday, we'll have our freedom. But if you lose it, we'll never get it back. Kids, 7 to 14, giving me a lecture in American about how freedom was. They were so convincing. I just stood there dumbfounded. Looked at my watch and said, I had a Jeep waiting for me to take me around town. I said, kids, I got to go. I got to leave right now. And thanks a lot. Appreciate it. We'll never give up on you. I got about 30 feet away, and a voice says, these kids are so different. How come they're so different? And then in a flash, I knew. 1 hour at the fence in this uniform, and not one kid by voice inflection or body language said, dummy, don't you know kids like chocolate? And when I realized that, I couldn't believe it. They had none. For a couple of years, they had none except from GIs in the streets of Berlin. None available. And not one of the boys or girls, by any indication or by hand motion, do you have any chocolate? When I realized that, I'd flown to South America, I'd flown in Europe, I'd flown all over different places during the war doing different stuff. And kids in those countries, even the United Kingdom, they'd chase you down the street in American uniform. You've got a connection to the chocolate shop. We want some of that stuff. Grab you by the arm. Gum chum, chocolate. Not one of those kids. They're so grateful. Gratitude. How important is that in human relations? Gratitude makes enemies friends. It's a synergy. It opens up all kinds of possibilities. Gratitude. That's what did it. Simply gratitude. Well, anyway, I reached my pocket and I said, hope I got something. A candy bar. And I had 2 sticks of Wrigley's Double Mint Gum. And 30 kids, I said, boy, some little girl's going to get a black eye. I don't want to try that. And so I turned to leave, and a voice clear as a bell. I know it's true. That's the only trigger that did it. I had a command, go back to the fence. Still a small voice, go back to the fence. It was a command. I just turned around, went back to the fence. Boy, they grabbed the barbed wire, took the 2 pieces, broke them in half, passed them through the barbed wire. The kids were doing this translating, and here come the rush. And oh boy, and there was a big conversation going on. No pushing, no shoving. And it was obvious that the kids that didn't get it even wanted a piece of the wrapper. The kids that have a stick of gum, carefully tore off the outer wrapper in strips and passed it. And the kids that got a strip of paper put it up their nose and smelled it, and smelled it. Their eyes got big. I couldn't believe it. Just came out of the United States of America. Not enough appreciation. And that demonstration says, hey, buddy, you better be glad you're an American. And I said, wow, for $10 I could put them on Easy Street. I could include chocolate. But boy, I'll be getting back in Rhine Main tonight and get a shower and turn right around and fly 3 round trips to Berlin. I won't get through flying that till tomorrow. Good thing I got a good co-pilot. I'll be hanging on the ropes. And I had a great guy done. He could do a better job than I could. So that was good to have a good team. Well, then I remembered when I learned to fly, when I got the pilot license, I flew up to Idaho on a cross country, and where I used to live in Rigby, and I had my old buddy there, and I took a big bag of candy bars, tied them on parachutes. I knew I couldn't land up there where my old farm was up in Idaho, but I went from Utah, flipped the cross country up there, went over his house and gunned the engine a couple times. He came out. I dropped a big parachute of candy bars to him and went back down to Utah. So I said, hey, kids, there's a big open place here between the buildings and the fence. And if you'll stand there when I come in tomorrow, one of the trips in the daylight, I'll drop enough chocolate bars for all of you to have some if you'll do what's the magic word, which your dad and mom tell you. You share it? Will you share it? Oh, jawohl, we'll share it. And jumping up and down. I said, okay, I'll be back tonight, but don't worry about tonight. I'll be here just before noon tomorrow on my second trip. And then I started running. They were late for the Jeep. They yelled at me, come back. Boy, it didn't sound like the same kid. Come back, come back. What's the matter? He said, we got to know what airplane you're in. Every 5 minutes there's an airplane coming over our head, landing the runway. If we have to watch out in the airplane for some package of chocolate, we'll be cross-eyed. We won't be able to last through the day. We got to know what airplane you're in. That's a pretty logical question. And it's a good thing you ask questions sometimes, you know. And so I said, well, then I remembered. I said, look, initially I had to come over Tempelhof and then go over East Germany, Berlin rather, and come back and land. So when I come over your heads the first time, when I'm over your head, I'm going to wiggle the wings, that big airplane. So when that big airplane wiggles the wings like crazy, that's got it. Just watch that. Get out of here. Let's start this thing. Went over the BX in West Berlin. Had no trouble getting on the airplane with this ticket I'm wearing. Every 5 minutes there's an empty airplane going back, so I had no problem getting on the airplane. Went to the basic change. Well, first of all, we lived in the attic of a barn. When we got there was no room anywhere. I was living actually in a barn in Zeppelinheim. Well, anyway, the co-pilot and engineer, give me a ration. Chocolate was highly rationed in West Germany. What are you going to do with it? You are? You got permission? No. You're going to get us in trouble. I said, I'll take responsibility. I got to have your ration. And they were good guys. They bought all they could buy. It was just weeks, all you could get. Week's ration, 3 rations. Holy cow. Hit him in the head with that going 110 miles an hour will make the wrong impression. So I remembered back to the old Piper Cub we had. Handkerchiefs bad, handkerchiefs. I had a bad cold, had lots of handkerchiefs. So we did a test hop in the barn. We went up in the attic of the barn and tied up handkerchief parachutes on big packages of blocks and threw them out to see how they'd open. Some of the buddies saw us. You can't go home early playing you're out of your mind, guy. And we said, that we're out of our mind. We don't want anybody to know about it, of course. Well, we did a test program and went back that night, and of course, the next day we got over Berlin about 11 o'clock. And thank goodness it was a clear day. And as we came over, looked down in the open place, and there was those kids, 30 of them, right in the middle. I'm sure they hadn't told another soul. And wiggled the wings, and they just went crazy, just waved like mad. Came over their head, and the engineer standing right, we only get about 100, 200 feet in the air, and the engineer standing between the two pilots. And on the C-54, we had a flare chute, like a stovepipe comes out of the flight deck for flares. So if you lose an engine, 2 engines or more over the farm at night, you drop flares and miss the farmer's house. So it was really handy. The flare chute was right between the legs of my engineer. So he had it all ready. We had 3 parachutes loaded really heavy, to load, mostly so they'd see the stuff. So we came over and he said, sure, shove it out, Elkins. We'd gone over the fence immediately. Didn't know what happened. We didn't know whether we hit him or not. And we were more worried about the guys lined up to take off, seeing this thing and reported us. But anyhow, we taxied out to take off. 20,000 pounds of stuff was off in about 15 minutes from the unloading the Germans, flour, medicine, whatever we had. Taxied out along the point to take off, and there through the barbed wire were 3 handkerchiefs on arms waving through there at all the airplanes. I wish they wouldn't do that. But I rolled out the window and waved to the guys anyway in this uniform and said, wow, pick up. That's all we're through. Well, for a week we flew, kids were lined up, more kids, 2 weeks, kids more lined up, and 3 weeks, and there was a crowd around there. And I said, once more and that's all? How many said that and then regretted it? Once more and that's all. So we got another one and dropped it. And boy, the reaction was getting big. The kids were really celebrating. They were out there all the time. And let's do once more and that. And we did once more and that's all. Too late. Came back from Berlin one night to Rhine-Main, met with an officer at the airplane. Halvorsen, Colonel Hahn wants to see you right now. I said, what for? He says, he'll tell you what for. For a little while, I thought it was going to be court-martialed. And he said, Halvorsen, did you everything learn I took ROTC. Did you everything learn in ROTC about military? Yes, sir, I'm sorry. No excuse, sir, no excuse. And he said, well, General Tunner called me and said, what are you doing dropping parachutes, Hahn? I'm not dropping parachutes, sir, you know that. We're landing, unloading all this stuff. So better find out what's going on in your outfit clunk. A lesson for you going forward, make your boss look good. Don't try and go around your boss no matter how smart you are. Go through channels. That's important to do that. Well, that's how it started. General Tunner says, just keep me informed. Go ahead. All my buddies started doing it. A 2 sticks of gum turned into 20 tons through the air, through the sky over the next 9 months, and that's documented. And 3 tons, we saved 3 tons at Christmas time, and the orphanages. I went around to a lot of the orphanages there and took stuff to the orphanage kids, and we took 3 tons to the orphanages.
And that turned into a big campaign back home too, didn't it?
Oh, the campaign. The Hershey Candy Bar Company sent me a message, Halvorsen, how much of this stuff do you want? And I gave them some ridiculous number, and they kept sending it all the time. Like we couldn't tie up the parachutes, for heaven's sakes. So Chicopee Falls, Massachusetts, the school in Chicopee says, hey, we'll tie all your parachutes up, just give them to us. So we did. They just shipped the stuff. They just load the candy on extra. It doesn't even on the manifest. They just throw it on the airplane, and then they take it over to the kids in Chicopee. Chicopee, Mass. That's after they tied it up. But the Chicopee, Mass. Kids tied it all up, ready to drop. We just cut the top off, and then we quit dropping it around the field. Of course, we drop it all over the city. The crew chief would go back. check it out, the escape hatch. We got 4 big escape hatches. Cut the top out of the box, handholds, keep the box, hopefully, and check it up against the window and just scatter it all over the place. Crazy pattern.
Tell me a little bit about Peter Zimmerman and his question for you.
Oh, we got lots of letters, naturally. Well, Peter Zimmerman wrote me a letter. He said, look, he said, I'm 9 years old, and my legs aren't very long, and I'm not getting this stuff. Bigger kids are beating me to it. And he says, but I tell you what you can do. He says, when you take off, come down the Spray River Second Railroad Bridge, turn right 1 block, and live at the bombed-out house in the corner. I'll be there every day at 2 o'clock. Drop it there. Well, I still got that letter. And so we took off. It was clear. We got permission. Tower, we got to deviate from the flight pattern, leaving town. And he said, go ahead. We'll clear you where you want to do. So we went down the Spray Second Bridge, turned right. There was a house out there, and a kid said, check it out the window. My crew chief, check it out. I got a letter from Peter Zimmerman. How did you guys win the war anyway? He says, you dropped it to neighbor kids. And I said, wow, that was too bad. A failed mission. So I took a big package of chocolate gum, a big one, mailed it to Peter Zimmerman. We became really good friends. Dad, Mom both were killed during the war, and he was living with an aunt and uncle. Later on, I'd see that building that I dropped it to.
You talked a little bit about that still small voice. Can you talk to me a little bit about how your faith has influenced your service and in that time?
Well, I think the one reason that I got along so well, maybe the trigger that caused me to think about dropping those kids and what those kids were like was we just learned to share. We had to share, and when the neighbor living on a farm again, we didn't have a huge farm, very big farm, and the neighbor didn't have any money to hire help either. And when we got through, Dad just made it well known, buddy, we're not through. We're not through, your neighbor's through. And that was just part of the way he lived his religion. He said, you haven't realized what real good feeling you have unless you've done something like that. You've got to help somebody else. That was just viewed being since I was just a little guy. And the neighbors, somebody beat somebody through getting an A up then we'd go help the neighbor. That was just part of our life. And it was just so natural that you want to help somebody.
Colonel Halvorsen, who do you think were the true heroes of the Berlin airlift?
Well, there were 31 American true heroes of the airlift and 39 Brits, but I'm not one of them. The heroes of the airlift are those guys who gave their lives to the guys who were trying to kill them a few years before. I only knew one person on the airlift who complained about flying day and night, about close calls, radar going up and almost hitting the guys in the cloud. Airplane landed every 3 minutes. There were a lot of close calls. Only one person I knew complained. Why? And the bottom line is, the only real value you get out of life, and that's player, is serving, getting outside yourself. The Dead Sea's dead because it takes in all the water and turns to salt. And there are Dead Sea souls in your community. What's in it for me? As a killer. How much are you going to give me if the need's obvious? The need is obvious and no money. So that's one of the great lessons I learned about the air in the experience.
Your experience in Berlin happened so early in your career. What did you do after the Berlin airlift? Where did you spend most of your career?
In the Berlin airlift?
Following the Berlin airlift.
Well, I just had a couple of quarters at Utah State, the university, before I got called, before I volunteered to fly in there and join the Air Corps. And they offered me a regular commission off the farm. They needed more pilots. Too many pilots were getting out after the war. So they started a non-college pilot training program. Didn't have to have a degree. And they said, if you've got to be a regular officer to do it. And they offered me and a lot of others while we're still in Germany to stay in the Air Force, Army Air Corps. And if you didn't have a degree, they'd send you. And I said, yeah, I don't believe it. I want to get out. I want to start a business. My mom told me to look out for guys like you. And so but he said, wait, here it is in writing. I said, well, yeah, well, I'm a farm kid. I don't know how that military life would work with me. I didn't know anything about the military, and I'm a non-smoker, non-drinker. I won't get on along anywhere. Well, of course, that's the wrong thing to say here, because that's not what everybody's all about anyway. But I was a kid, didn't know. And what if I don't want to stay in for family reasons, whatever else? You can resign, show me. And he showed the reg, and he resigned. I signed up. And then after I got out, after didn't get out, after the airlift, it took me a couple of years, but they sent me back to Florida. Tried to go to out west, Western University could be out west, but they changed the regs, sent east, if you got to say. I went to the University of Florida, got a bachelor's in aeronautical engineering in 2 years, went around the clock, and they sent me another year to get a master's degree. From there, I went into research and development on aircraft first, but most of my time after that in my career, almost a third of it, not quite a third, was in the space program. I got in the space program, came here to school in '57, went right to the space program in Los Angeles, worked with General Schriever. As a field grade officer, I had more responsibility there than I had most any other time in my career, before or after. As a project office, I was in charge of picking how to put an Air Force man in the space to beat the Russians. It was MISS, Man in Space Soonest. I wrote the development plan for that. Worked with all the teams, the contractors, and how we do it. Martin got the award for the booster to put it in there. A Titan II liquid fuel ICBM as a core, beefed up the skin to make it strong enough, and I had the responsibility to get that assigned to a contractor. They got the contract, and then Wright Field, and this was out of Space Systems Division in Los Angeles. Wright Field had the responsibility for the glider, to put the glider on top. I can't have time to tell you about the research going into a space glider. And we had to marry those two things, put them together. So that's how I got into the space business. And I was only a major, more responsibility than I had in the rest of the Air Force almost. And then as soon as it got approved, then they jacked it up, and I helped the colonel.
We could all be so lucky. So following the Berlin airlift, following your long, distinguished career, do you still keep in contact? Are you active in any Berlin airlift societies?
Oh, yes. I'm with a bunch of Berlin airlift veterans. We got a C-54. We flying all the stuff inside of it, mocked up the same as the airlift. We flew it to Europe for 69 days, Great Britain, France, Luxembourg, Germany twice. Big celebrations. We're still flying the airplane. I'm in the right seat. That's all right with me.
Do you still keep in contact with Peter? Can you tell me about some of the letters you've received in the?
Oh, we got so many. I couldn't read the letters because I was always flying. I didn't even try to read them on the short trip to Berlin. So I had 2 German secretaries that answered all the mail, and there was a ton of it. The kids complaining, kids thanking you. Well, I haven't got time for all that. The interaction was unbelievable. But anyway, just two quick letters. One was from a little boy named Peter Zimmerman, and he says, "Look, did I tell that already?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank goodness. Okay. The other one was Mercedes Wild, and she says, "Look, you're causing this terrible problem." Boy, that's a quick way to get your attention. She was 9-year-old girl. She says, when you come right over our apartment house before you land, and you're scaring their chickens. And when we got a bunch of white chickens down there, and when you come over, they think you're a chicken hawk. And they run in the chicken coop, and they're losing their feathers. And that's bad news. When they do that, they quit laying eggs. When you see the chickens drop it there, don't care if it scares them. Well, I said, buddy, everybody, look out for the chickens. Drop them, hit the chickens if you can. Well, we took special attention. All the buddies were looking for chickens. Stuff out the parachute. Couldn't, nobody could, I said, bomb the approach. We bombed the approach. You missed me again. How did you guys win the war anyway? Same thing as Peter Zimmerman. It sounds like a chorus. Well, anyway, we took a huge box of candy and mailed it to when we did that to hundreds of kids, mailed it to Mercedes. Later on, for 2 sticks of gum in 48, they signed me, took me out of the space program for Pete's sake, and sent me to Berlin as the commander of Tempelhof for 4 years. The longest a guy had been there before was 2 years and 6 months, and they sent me there for 4 years. And then every kid that caught a parachute wanted me to come to dinner. We could eat free for 4 years. But I started an air show. We started an air show with all the different, bringing airplanes and skydivers and stuff once a year. And we had bring the kids on the airbase. So open up the airbase once a year and then fly over and as part of the program, dropping candy bars to the parachutes. Well, the letters were absolutely rewarding, and we're taking too much time.
No, sir, you're good. It really has been a pleasure to have you here on the stage and to share some time with you this past week. Before we get off the stage, is there any advice you'd like to offer the future leaders in the room?
Well, maybe what is it that impressed me in 95 in my life and the early being part of it? Well, first of all, I think the importance of attitude. I told you about that already, didn't I? I hope you remember that. 95% of the things you can, but 5% God grant me the serenity to accept. Attitude, gratitude. I'm here because gratitude is kids. And throughout the canyon to you. It's the elixir that provides a bond between people. It opens the conversation. It breaks down the barrier. If you're thinking of what's in it for me all the time, you're not going to get the gratitude part of the equation. So gratitude it opens up things you never even dreamed about. You sit here and scheme all day. How am I going to beat that guy out of $10? And you're going to lose the battle. If you see, what's that guy worrying about? He's going around with a frown on his face, trying to run somewhere or hurry. Wonder what's the matter with him. And farmers, holy cow, we live by that creed. We live by that creed. So attitude, gratitude. And the killer, really, the Trump ace is serves before self. To get outside yourself. I told you why the Dead Sea's dead. I hope you remember that. Take in everything and give out nothing, you turn to salt. So attitude, gratitude, service before self. It's not a bigger, newer car, a Mercedes instead of a Ford, or it's not a bigger house than your neighbor. You get satisfaction out of life. You miss the boat. The only way to do it is to think about somebody else, to get outside yourself. And you've had that experience. You're here because of that. I'm preaching to the choir. You're in the service. What does that tell you? Service. That's why you're here. You're not going to be millionaires, but you're serving people. You're going to look in the eye of people around the world before you get out of, before you retire out of that uniform. Look in their eyes, they see you come to help. We've been helping people, George Washington on, bringing hope. One of the kids that got a parachute came up to me and showed me the thing, and he says, it wasn't the chocolate. What it meant to me, that somebody outside of here cared about me and did something about it. I can live without rations, on thin rations, which is it, but not without hope. Without hope, the soul dies. Without hope, the soul dies. You've got friends and neighbors in River City without hope. And that's what you're about. A uniform is a symbol of hope. The United States of America Constitution that gives that right to everybody to have hope. You couldn't be in a better spot. Challenging. You're not going to be rich. But when you're dead, you don't know you're not rich. So anyway, those are the little decisions. The little decisions you make in your life put your footsteps on where you end up, for good or bad. I just got the prompt, hey, go back to the fence, stupid. Changed my life. Changed the life of my family. The little decisions you make. Go to your conscience. You've all got it. It's not limited to any one religion or religion at all. You're born with it. You got a GPS. You beat the technology. Listen to it. Maybe I better try that. Maybe that'll help. Change your life.
Well, sir, I want to thank you. I also want you to know that your legacy lives to this day. In fact, I heard stories when I was on staff at Air Mobility Command, most recently with the airdrops that happened in Iraq over the mountains of Mount Sinjar, how they strapped bundles of candy on top of those humanitarian pallets.
They did.
So I want to thank you on behalf of our class in the Gathering of Eagles.
Well, God bless you. I'd sure give my right arm to be in your suit right now, where you're sitting. Got a great world out there. Go for it. But listen to your GPS, the real one, okay? Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Halvorsen.